Dr. Bob, the Old Scouter. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of tandem canoeing, that is, with two paddlers. This presentation is aimed at beginning canoeists, scouts who've had very little experience in a canoe. It does not cover all the information that you need for Canoeing Merit Badge, and it only covers tandem canoeing. Let's talk about the anatomy of a canoe. The front of the canoe is called the bow, and the back is called the stern. The left side is called the port side, and the right side is called the starboard side. We also talk about going to starboard or going to port, or making a starboard turn or a port turn. Some canoes have seats. They are known as the bow seat and the stern seat, and the paddlers are called the bow paddler or bowman, and the stern paddler or sternman. In canoes without seats, the paddlers kneel on the bottom of the canoe. Thwarts are the braces that support the sides of the canoe. They are not seats, and sitting on them can bend or break them. The top edge of the hull of a canoe is known as the gunwale, which is spelled G-U-N-W-A-L-E, but pronounced gunwale. Canoes are referred to by their length, such as a 14-foot canoe or a 16-foot canoe, which is pretty standard for tandem canoeing. If we look at a canoe end-on, we see that the maximum width of the canoe is called the beam, while the distance from the gunwale to the bottom is called the depth. The distance from the water level, the water line, to the bottom of the canoe is the draft, and the distance from the water line to the lowest point of the gunwale is called the freeboard. Many canoes have one or more ridges on the bottom, known as keels, which help to keep the canoe moving in a straight line. Canoes can be built of various materials. Aluminum canoes are the most common ones that scout camps use, and they're very durable and easy to repair if damaged. Aluminum canoes can last for generations. They most often have keels, which can get hung up on rocks at times and be a slight disadvantage. Also, aluminum canoes are relatively heavy, weighing 65 to 75 pounds for a standard tandem canoe, which can be a little heavy for younger scouts to carry. Wooden canoes are frequently made of cedar strips. They weigh about the same as aluminum canoes, but they're much more expensive. Usually they're handmade. They have very high maintenance and are easily damaged. Kevlar canoes are lightweight, being about 2/3 the weight of an aluminum canoe. They're also quite expensive and somewhat easily cracked. If you rent canoes for an expedition or an outing, you're probably best to pay the extra money and get the insurance to protect you in case the Kevlar canoe gets damaged. Fiberglass canoes weigh about the same as an aluminum canoe. Other composite materials such as Ramex or Royal X are lighter and easier to carry. These are relatively inexpensive canoes. Canoe paddles can be made from various materials. Most scout camps and outfitters use paddles with plastic T-shaped handles and plastic blades with an aluminum shaft. An all-plastic paddle is generally not a good idea because they're generally too flexible. Grip and blade shapes vary, with flat-tip blades being the most common. The parts of the paddle are the grip, the shaft, the throat, which is where the shaft joins the blade, and the blade. Always take care of your canoe paddle, lest you find yourself up a creek without one. It's best to have an extra paddle secured to the canoe with twist ties or rope of some kind. You can secure it to a thwart or the seat. Do not lay or set your paddle on the ground. Someone might step on it, break the shaft or bend the shaft or split the blade. Don't set the tip on the ground. If you stand there for a while holding your canoe paddle, place the tip on the toe of your shoe. Hang your paddles up to dry. Don't lean them against a wall or something like that so that the blade tip is completely off of the ground.
Yep. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about sizing the paddle for your body size. A couple ways to do this. The way I like to do it is just put it on the toe of my shoe, and the paddle grip should come just about to the chin. Other way to do it is should be able to grab the paddle like this by grip and by tip, and be able to hold it. If you're in a lake, you want probably a little longer, broader paddle. If you're in a stream, you want a little shorter paddle. It's a little bit more maneuverable, and because streams are shallow, you may find yourself hitting the bottom if you use a long paddle.
Personal flotation devices must always be worn when you're in the canoe or near the water's edge. Make sure that all the zippers, straps, and buckles are fastened. Unless they're designed as seat cushions, do not use spare PFDs as cushions. Hang up your PFDs to dry so that they won't mildew or mold, and never lay your PFDs on the ground where they can get dirty or damaged.
Okay, let's talk about life jackets, or more officially personal flotation devices. They come in 5 types, from type 1 to type 5. Type 1 is the kind you'll find on a commercial ship, a ferry, or a cruise ship, or something like that. This is a type 2. This is the kind we recommend for non-swimmers who are going to be riding in a canoe. This type 2 will turn most people face up, keep their head out of the water, even if they're unconscious. Goes over the head, strap goes around the chest, buckles in here. Problem with the type 2 vest is it's a little bulky. It can be hard to turn, it can be hard to move in it, it's hard to paddle in it. So we don't recommend these for paddling. This is type 3 vest. This doesn't keep your head up out of the water, but it'll keep you afloat. It's a lot less bulky than a type 2. It will suffice for most paddlers. It's what we recommend for most paddlers. Again, has to be tight. Should be able to pull up on it and not ride up too much. Anything you don't want to lose, you attach either to yourself or to the canoe. So I have a couple of things attached to my vest. I have a whistle. This particular whistle has a compass on it and a thermometer to measure water temperature, so you can tell if the water's too cold for canoeing. 3 blasts of the whistle is the distress call. So if you get into trouble, you have a whistle like this, tells everybody that you need some help. Second thing I have attached, I have a compass. If you are navigating up north in Boundary Waters or Quetico, you're going to be navigating across big lakes by a compass course. Helpful to have a compass, and it's attached to the vest. Lastly, I have a knife. A little inexpensive folding knife that the blade locks. If you're canoeing down a stream and you get under some trees, sometimes you'll find fishing line there. You can get caught up with fishing hooks. If you roll out of your canoe, you may get tangled up in things. It may be nice to be able to cut yourself free. So again, this is the type of vest we recommend for paddlers, a type 3 vest. Every PFD should have a label on it. This says it's a type 3. It's an adult 2XL. So it gives you the size and the type of the vest. This is a type 4 PFD. It's basically a flotation device. It's something that you can throw to somebody if they end up in the water and they need rescued. It's not a substitute for a life jacket or a life vest. Okay? It is not going to consistently keep you up. You do not wear this thing. You hang onto it like this on your front, not on your back, if you need it. That'll keep you face upright. This is the one type of PFD you can use as a seat cushion. Do not use a type 2 or a type 3, even a spare one, as a seat cushion. You'll damage it. But this is a type 4, a throwable device. This is called a flotation aid. People use it when they're learning how to swim, and water skiers use it to some degree. For our purposes as a canoeist, it is absolutely worthless. It will not keep you up. It will not guarantee that you do not go underwater and drown. I don't want to see this anywhere near a canoe. It really is unsafe to substitute this for a proper Type 3 or Type 2 life jacket. Thanks for listening.
Always check the label on your PFDs to make sure, A, that it's an approved device. This label shows Coast Guard approval and approval by the underwriters' laboratories. And it also shows the size. This is a Type 3 PFD designed as a boating vest and size adult large with a chest size of 40 to 44 inches. Talk about putting on a PFD. Start by undoing all the straps, zips, and buckles. Put it on like a jacket if it's that type. Fasten all the straps and tighten them, starting at the bottom and moving up. If it goes over your head, do the same. Start at the bottom, tightening all the straps, and working your way up. Some vests have nice little pockets where you can tuck the end of the strap into them. Avoid over-tightening the shoulder straps if there are shoulder straps. That can pull the PFD up too high. Check your fit by lifting on the shoulders. Make sure it doesn't go up over your face, where it will obstruct your breathing and not keep your head out of the water.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to dress for a canoe trip. As you can see, even though it's summer, I'm wearing long sleeves and long pants. This is a polyester shirt. You can get this thing sopping wet, like if you get dumped in the lake, and it'll be dry in 30 minutes. Same thing with these pants, polyester or nylon. These are warm-up pants. They're very comfortable, easy to move around in. No fleece. You don't want any fleece or cotton lining or anything like that. So these, again, will dry in 30 minutes. In terms of shoes, I like to wear sneakers. You can wear water shoes, but slip-on water shoes may come off in the water, or if you get into a muddy place. These are old ones that I don't mind getting wet, that I don't mind washing. Don't want any open-toed shoes. Don't want any sandals or anything like that, flip-flops, because there's sticks, there's stones in the water, and you can cut yourself and you'll be nursing a cut foot the rest of the day. I like to wear a hat. Keeps the sun out of my eyes, helps protect me from sunburn on my face. You can wear a ball cap, you can wear a slouch hat or a boonie hat like this. I use a keeper on my hat. You can make one of these, if you can't find one, out of a couple of binder clips and some paracord or something like that. Keeps your hat attached to you so that if the wind comes up, you won't lose your hat into the middle of the lake. Also, some people like to wear gloves. If you do, weightlifting gloves or biking gloves are the best. They give you some protection, help protect against blisters, and they dry fairly easily. Sunglasses are nice, especially if it's a really sunny day. Make sure you have a foam strap on the back that floats so that if they come off in the water, you don't lose your Ray-Bans in the bottom of a 50-foot lake. Thank you, and see you later. These are called dry bags. Their purpose is to keep things dry in case your canoe gets wet or splashed. They come in various sizes, from this little 1 liter to this huge thing. Anything you don't want to get wet goes in the dry bag. So I have my rain gear. Complete rain suit, pants, and top. I have insect repellent. I have sunscreen. And I have a little blister kit here, or first aid kit. Has some Band-Aids, moleskin, and a pair of manicure scissors that I can use to cut out the moleskin to the shape and size I need. And that all fits in a little candy tin. I always take one of these hiking with me. And that goes in the dry bag. Get as much air out of the dry bag as you can. Roll it up. And that's it. Okay, as I mentioned before, anything you don't want to lose, you attach either to yourself or to the canoe. So I have my dry bag with my rain gear, first aid kit, sunscreen, and insect repellent. And I'm just going to clip this to the thwart. I have my water bottle and a little lanyard here. You want to stay hydrated? That gets clipped to the boat. Little plastic cup that I punched a hole in with just a paper punch. That's a bailer to get water out of the canoe. Sponge, just sponge it out when I'm done. Always good to have an extra paddle with you. These little twist ties do a great job of holding things in place and are completely reusable, so those are great.
We're going to introduce some basic canoe strokes at this point in time. When we speak of a forward stroke, we mean a stroke that moves the canoe forward. That stroke starts towards the front of the canoe and moves towards the back. A reverse stroke or backward stroke slows the forward movement of the canoe or moves it backwards, and it starts at the back of the canoe and moves towards the front. Because we're paddling on the side of a canoe, not straight down the middle, a stroke not only moves the canoe forward or backward, but it also tends to turn the canoe to one side or the other. Forward strokes turn the canoe to the side opposite from the side where you stroke. In other words, a forward stroke on the left side of the canoe tends to turn the canoe to the right. A backward stroke turns the canoe to the side on which you stroke. So if you do a backward or reverse stroke on the right, it moves the canoe towards the right. Here we show the effect of paddling on the left. It moves the canoe in an arc towards the right side. Because of their position in the boat, the paddler in the stern has more of an effect on the direction of the canoe than the paddler in the bow. All things being equal, the canoe will tend to move according to the stroke of the stern man. So in this case, we have the bow person paddling on the left side, the stern paddler on the right side, and the canoe takes a slight course to the left. In the following illustrations, we use the black arrow to show the path of the stroke and the red arrows to show the path of the canoe. The paddle goes into the water at the tail of the arrow, and the end of the stroke is at the head of the arrow. This pretty well illustrates the mechanics of a power stroke on the right-hand side by the bow paddler. At the beginning of the stroke, the paddle enters the water. The left hand is gripping the grip. The right hand is gripping the throat of the paddle where the shaft joins the blade. The body leans forward slightly. Notice that the left hand has to cross over to the right side of the body so that it is almost directly over the right hand and the paddle is held almost vertically. As you pull back on the paddle, you pull back in a straight line. You don't follow the curve of the hull of the canoe. The body straightens out, leans back slightly. The torso, the abdomen, and the chest rotate slightly to the right. Once you reach the end of your stroke, you lift the paddle out of the water, you turn the blade 90 degrees and bring it back to the beginning. That's called the recovery phase, or feathering the blade, so that you reduce wind resistance. In the bow, your paddle goes from the tip of the canoe to the hip. In the stern, it goes from the hip of the canoe towards the back tip. There are some common mistakes that beginning paddlers make. The most common one is to not bring the top hand across the body so that the grip hand is directly over the throat hand. Making short, choppy strokes is inefficient rather than long, smooth strokes. Bringing the stroke too far back so that you're really not propelling the canoe forward, but you're just trying to lift water. And not going straight back, but following the side of the canoe. Remember, in the bow, a forward stroke goes tip to hip, and in the stern, it goes from hip to tip.
Let's talk a little bit about canoe strokes. The best way I have for teaching canoe strokes outside of getting in the water in a canoe is to sit on a bench or a chair that's up off the ground a bit so you can practice your strokes in the air and you can see exactly what you're doing. So the first stroke we're going to do is called the power stroke or the forward stroke. You're going to take, your paddle should be almost vertical. It's very important that your top hand, which grabs the grip, come across the center of your body and be almost directly over your bottom hand. Your top hand grabs the grip, your bottom hand grabs the throat of the paddle where the blade and the shaft meet. Okay? You don't want to paddle like this. So it's two things. It's inefficient, you waste a lot of energy, and because the paddle's further out to the side of the canoe, it tends to turn the canoe to the opposite side more. So it's very important that your hands be vertical. You know, put the paddle in the water and pull back. Come out, turn the paddle, back, so paddle goes in, pulls back to about the hip, comes out of the water, turns, and comes forward again to make the next stroke. Notice that my body is leaning forward a little bit on the stroke and leaning back with every stroke. Also, my body is turning a little bit as I make the stroke. I'm using the energy of my torso, of my abdomen and chest, rather than just my arms. If you use just your arms, you're going to wear out in a hurry. Again, left hand, top hand on the grip, right hand on the throat. Paddle is vertical, come straight back. We go, in the front of the canoe, we go tip of the canoe to hip. In the back of the canoe, we go hip to tip. Do not extend your stroke all the way like this. Don't do this. The last half of that stroke is doing nothing to propel you forward. It's just trying to lift water out of, or push the canoe down. So really all you got to do is go back to here. If you're in the front of the boat, like this. If you're in the back of the boat, like this. Okay?
The reverse stroke or backwater or backstroke is used to slow the canoe or back up the canoe. It's the reverse of the forward stroke. In the bow, the stroke goes from hip to tip, and in the stern it goes from tip of the canoe to the hip, again following a straight line, not following the curve of the canoe hull.
Next stroke we're going to do is the reverse stroke or the backwater. It's what you use to slow down the canoe or to back it up. And it's basically the reverse of the power stroke. Put your paddle in the water vertically. Left hand or grip hand is over your throat hand, gripping into the same place, the grip of the blade and the throat of the blade where the shaft joins the blade. Put it in the water, push forward, bring it up out of the water, and repeat. If you're in the front, you're going to go hip to the tip of the canoe. If you're in the back, you're going to go tip of the canoe to your hip. That's it.
If you remember, I said that the paddler in the stern has more of an effect on the direction of the canoe than the paddler in the bow. Therefore, if the paddler in the stern is paddling on the right side of the canoe is going to tend to go to the left. If he's paddling on the left, it's going to tend to go to the right. In order to correct for this tendency, from time to time, the stern paddler has to do what's called a J-stroke. This is a stroke that beginning paddlers have a hard time learning. You don't need to do a J-stroke with every stroke. It's only used to straighten out the canoe so you stay on a straight course. Best way to maintain a straight course is for the stern paddler to look ahead and pick out some kind of landmark, a tree, a house, a rock, so that the canoe is aiming straight for, and maintain that straight line so that the canoe is always aimed towards that landmark. With a J-stroke, It starts like a power stroke, comes straight back, and then at the very end of the stroke, the blade of the paddle turns outward and the paddler pushes out on the paddle to push the end of the canoe to the opposite side.
Second stroke. If you paddle on the right side of the canoe, it tends to move the canoe to the left. If you paddle on the left side of the canoe, it moves the canoe to the right. The person in the stern, in the back of the boat, has more of an effect on the direction of the canoe than the person in the front. So, all things being equal, if your bowman is paddling on the left and the stern man is paddling on the right, you're going to tend to go a little to the left. Every once in a while, the stern man has to do what's called a J stroke to correct that. A J stroke starts out like a forward stroke or a power stroke, comes in, and at the very end of the stroke, the blade turns out and pushes out a little bit. That pushes the back of the canoe over to the left and straightens out the canoe. You don't have to do this with every stroke. Just periodically to keep you going in a straight way, straight course. Notice where my left hand does. When I get to the end of my stroke, my wrist turns down. When my wrist turns down, the blade of the paddle turns parallel to the side of the canoe. Then when I push out, it pushes to the right, which pushes the back of the canoe to the left. Of course, you can do this on the other side just as easily, but I'm just demonstrating one side. So again, when I get to the back of the stroke, my wrist turns down, which turns the paddle outward, and then I can push away a little bit. This is the J stroke. Again, not every stroke needs to be a J stroke, but once in a while you need to do that to keep going straight.
Sweep strokes are used to turn the canoe. In a sweep stroke, the canoe paddle follows a C-shaped arc through 90 degrees. In this stroke, the shaft is almost horizontal. You insert the blade at the front of the stroke and pull it back through 90 degrees, making a wide sweeping curve with the tip of the paddle. In the bow, it goes from tip to hip, and in the stern, it goes from hip to tip. The result is to turn the canoe away from the side on which you're stroking.
We have just 4 more strokes to learn. Those are the 2 basic ones. The next one is called the sweep stroke. The sweep stroke is used to turn the canoe. When you use a sweep stroke on the right side, it moves the canoe to the left. When you use it on the left side, it moves the canoe to the right. The way you do a sweep stroke is you hold your blade of your paddle vertically, you put the paddle in the water with it almost horizontal, and you sweep around in a 90-degree arc. Come out and repeat. I'm showing you the bowman's sweep stroke. The sternman's sweep stroke goes like this, starts at right angles to the canoe and goes back to the back of the boat. Bow person like this and goes to your hip. Again, it goes tip to hip in the front, hip to tip in the back. Notice the blade of the paddle is vertical. The shaft of the paddle is almost horizontal. Because it's so far out and it's doing this sweeping C shape, it moves the canoe very nicely.
The reverse sweep stroke turns the canoe towards the side on which you're paddling. It's the absolute reverse of a sweep stroke. In the bow, you start at the hip and you go to the tip in a wide sweeping curve. In the stern, you start at the tip of the canoe, the back tip, and stroke in a wide curve to the hip.
A reverse sweep stroke is just the opposite of this. In the back, you start in the back, you bring it to the front. Tip to hip, tip to hip, tip to hip. In the front, you start hip to tip, hip to tip, hip to tip. A reverse sweep stroke turns you towards the side you're paddling on. If you're paddling on the right, it moves the canoe to the right. If you're paddling on the left, it moves the canoe to the left.
A pull stroke is used to move the end of the canoe in the direction of the side on which you're paddling. It's done by inserting the blade vertically parallel to the long axis of the canoe, about 12 to 18 inches out from the side of the canoe, and pulling the paddle straight towards the side of the canoe. This pulls the canoe end towards the paddle. You can use this to turn a canoe very sharply, and you can also use it to pivot a canoe right in place so that it doesn't move forward or backward, but just spins in a circle. The push stroke is the opposite of the pull stroke. It moves the end of the canoe away from the stroke side. You put the canoe paddle in next to the canoe hull and push it away. A variation on this is called the pry stroke, where you take and put the canoe paddle in next to the canoe and pry the paddle using the gunnel of the canoe as a fulcrum. It, like the pull stroke, can move a canoe sideways or can spin a canoe right in place.
Last two strokes are pull strokes and push strokes or pry strokes. A pull stroke can actually move your canoe sideways, or you can pivot a canoe around in the length of the canoe, pivoting it right in place if you know how to use the push or pry and the pull stroke. The pull stroke, paddle goes in, foot or so, 18 inches off the side of the boat, and pulls right straight towards the boat, towards the side of the boat. Comes up, in, pull towards you. Pull towards you, lift out of the water, pull towards you, lift out of the water, pull towards you. It's going to move that end of the canoe to the side you're paddling on. A push stroke is just the opposite. You put the paddle in the water right next to the canoe and you push it away. You push it away. An efficient way to do it is sometimes the pry stroke, where you put it in the water and you brace your hand against the gunnel of the canoe and you just simply pry. And these are illustrated in the PowerPoint, but I wanted to show you in real life what it looks like. This is the best way to practice these strokes. Can you cut it off a second?
Moving forward in a canoe is a combination movement of the bow paddler and the stern paddler working together. The bow paddler does a forward or power stroke. The stern paddler does a forward or power stroke with occasional J strokes to keep moving in a straight line. If you want to turn to the left, you want to use the stern paddler does a sweep stroke or a reverse sweep stroke, depending on which side of the canoe he's on. If you want to turn to the left and the stern paddler is on the right, he does a sweep stroke. If the stern paddler is on the left, he does a reverse sweep stroke. To turn to the right, the bow paddler continues to do a power stroke. If the stern paddler is on the right-hand side, he does a reverse sweep stroke. And if he's on the left-hand side, he does a sweep stroke. Sharp turns are done by the bow paddler continuing to do a power stroke, and the stern paddler does a pull stroke or a push stroke, depending upon whether they want to go right or left, and whether they're on the right side or the left side. In this case, the stern paddler is on the right side, wants to make a left turn, he does a pull stroke. A left turn with the stern paddler on the left. The bow paddler continues to do a power stroke, and the stern paddler does a pry or a push stroke. For a sharp turn to the right, the stern paddler does a push stroke or a pry stroke on the right-hand side, or a pull stroke on the left-hand side. If you want to move the canoe to the left, moving it sideways, The bow paddler does a pull stroke, and the stern paddler does a push or a pry stroke. A draw stroke is another word for a pull stroke. If you want to move the canoe sideways to the left, and the bow paddler is on the right, he does a push or a pry stroke, and the stern paddler on the left-hand side does a draw stroke or a pull stroke. To move sideways to the right, with the bow paddler on the left, he does a push or a pry stroke, and the stern paddler does a draw or a pull stroke. If the positions are reversed, the bow paddler does a draw stroke, and the stern paddler does a push or a pry stroke. These sideways movements can be very handy, especially when you're trying to land a canoe. You may be a little bit too far away from a dock and need to move the canoe sideways to get it up against the dock. This is when you use your push or your pull strokes to move you sideways. Pivoting a canoe can be done by both paddlers using a draw stroke or a push stroke, depending on which side they're on and which side they want to turn to. Both paddlers do the same stroke, and it will spin the canoe just in place.
Okay, let's say you don't have a paddle or canoe and you want to practice your strokes. Get a chair, get a yardstick. Just practice your strokes with a yardstick. Nothing wrong with this. Gets you to learn the movement. Okay, you can do this at home before you get in the canoe. You'll look great. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you in the water.